Allie from Allie's Best, and today we are going to talk about race, religion, and all these other things that are super important, but society tells us we are not supposed to talk about. But before that, if you like videos like this or just Jewish lifestyle videos, mommy videos, random videos about what's on my mind, make sure you like this video and hit subscribe, the red subscribe button below, so you don't miss anything from me. Second thing, before we get started, is I am not an expert. I am just a regular person who happens to be African American and Jewish who wants to answer your questions. I put that out there because there are people out there who actually have done research on this topic and can give you a little bit better information than I can give you. That's my disclaimer for this video. Let's get started. The first question is, how far back does your Jewish ancestry go? And it's a two-part answer. One, as far back as we know. So I'm adopted, and I'm adopted by my mom, and my mom's family has been able to trace their heritage back to the 1800s, and as far back as that, everyone was Jewish, and that's as far as we know. And on my birth family side, I don't think I have any biological family members who are Jewish. And yeah. So there's that answer. Question number 2 is, what is your earliest memory of realizing you were Black or realizing you weren't like everyone else? And because I'm adopted and everyone in my family is white, I would have to say it was both really early and really, really late. One of my earliest memories has to do with my extended family. There was a really old woman in her 90s who would always ask me who I belonged to, which that phrasing, now that I'm an adult, is so atrocious. But she did not know who any of the grandchildren, who their parents were. She could not remember that, but she knew for sure that I stuck out because I was the only one who was Black. So I remember finding that super awkward and really uncomfortable and not fun to deal with, but I think that is probably my earliest memory. How do you feel about your daughter being white passing? That is a complicated one. I was really surprised when she was born, because she was born very blonde and very blue-eyed, and she's still very blonde and light-skinned and very blue-eyed, and she's gorgeous. But yeah, I was really surprised, and it definitely somehow affected the way I think I'm going to talk to her about race. I'm just not exactly sure how. I mean, I just thought she'd look a little bit more like me, but she's my husband's carbon copy. So it is a complicated feeling, I guess. But part of it is just, I wish she looked more like me because I'm selfish that way. I often find discrimination about my faith from white Jews. And I made a whole video kind of about that topic, and I'll link it right here, what not to say to Jews of color. I won't necessarily say I faced discrimination. No one has tried to keep me out of anything not seeming Jewish enough. I've definitely had a lot of really negative interactions in the Jewish community because of my race, but that video will explain more about that. Have you found a place where your identities intersect? I'm gonna say yes. I recently was on a Zoom call with a bunch of Jews of color, but especially a lot of Black Jews from around the country. And it was pretty incredible to see so many of us together, and yeah, that was really fun. The next question is, how does Judaism impact or inform your perspective of Black Lives Matter? I think Judaism shows that having an organization like Black Lives Matter is imperative because it's our job to try to fix the world and try to improve the world that we've been given, and Black Lives Matter is doing that. Kind of along the same lines, the next question was, how can a person rectify supporting Black Lives Matter while also being pro-Israel? And I basically think it's really difficult to agree with anyone on everything, and you can agree with Black Lives Matter on their political stances for what's going on in the United States and not agree with their international stances. And I think that that's fine. I also think that if you trust Black Lives Matter as an organization, that it should make you really critical of the other stances that you have in your life and see if there's things that you need to examine as far as what you support and how you support it. The next question is, how can I be a better ally? And I want to give you some quick actionable things. 1, go to protests and protect people of color. I'm not saying risk your own life. I'm saying you can use your privilege to de-escalate situations between police and people of color. 2, sign petitions. There are so many petitions out there that are really making differences as far as showing that there's a huge backing behind people wanting justice for the folks who've been killed by the police. 3, use your privilege every single day to improve the lives of other people. It's as simple as calling out racism when you see it. So if someone you know tells a racist joke, instead of laughing, you can just say, that's racist and that's not funny. No, it sounds easier said than done, but being an ally is about getting out there and making yourself uncomfortable to better the world for other folks. Oh, another thing you can do, obviously, is donate money to reputable organizations that are supporting people of color and who are supporting the families of people who have been murdered. Next one is, as a teacher, how can I address racism in my classroom when there's only one person of color in my class? And the first thing I want to say is you should be addressing racism in your classroom regardless of how many, if any, people of color there are in your class. So it can be difficult and you don't want anyone to feel singled out. But I think the most important thing is making sure that regardless of those things, you're addressing the issues in your room. Normally what I would do is if I was really concerned about that student feeling singled out is, you know, days before I'm planning on having this conversation, I would pull the student aside, let them know what I was planning on talking about, and ask them how they felt about it. In my situation, and I know it's different because I'm a person of color talking to another person of color, but in my experience, that student feels more empowered by having a conversation beforehand, so they know what's coming and they feel like part of this really important conversation rather than having it sprung on them and all of a sudden, you know, we're talking about racism and everyone turns and looks at the Black student. I have been that student. It is not fun. And I really would have liked to be pre-warned, especially if your class isn't used to having those conversations. Once talking about race and dismantling racism is part of your everyday progress as a teacher, it won't be weird when race comes up anymore. Another question that someone had was, how can we help Black Jews right now? And besides the steps of being an ally, something I want to say is right now Black Jews are being given an incredible voice in the Jewish community. And what I really hope is that we continue to allow those voices to be experts in our Jewish community after this new cycle cycles, and that we let them be experts on things outside of just being the topics centered around being Black and Jewish, because they are Jewish experts also, just like anyone who is Jewish who wants to share about their Jewish life. So I hope that we continue to allow those voices to be part of the conversation in Jewish communities, not just when the conversation is about race, but when it's about anything. Our value is not just because we are Black. We are valuable to the Jewish community just as Jews as is. What is the biggest thing I want non-Black Jews to know about my experience? The answer to that is that my race does not make me less Jewish than you. Are there any remarks that I get that are offensive that I get all the time? Again, I made a video all about that, so I'll link that above in a card and below in the description box. But yeah, there are definitely a lot of comments that people don't probably realize are offensive that I get a lot of. The next one is one that's really close to my heart, and it's how do we teach kids about race religion, and what is going on in the world right now. Bowie's kicking the camera. And I would say you always have to start with asking them questions, because you'd be amazed at what information, correct or incorrect, that kids already have about race and everything that's going on. So I would always start by asking questions, asking, you know, what do you know about what's going on with the world right now? Do you know that there are protests going on? If you do, what are they about, do you think? If I said the word race, would you know what that meant? Do you know what race you are? You know, questions like that, I think, are a good place to start so that you can start giving kids the language to have the conversations. I also think that it's important to be age appropriate but honest with kids. And I know that we don't want to make them feel scared in our world, but I also think it's important to be honest with kids. So I think, you know, I only have real experience with middle schoolers, and I feel like I can be completely, at that age, I feel like I can be completely honest and open with them about what's going on in this world. I'm not sure how I would approach it with younger kids, but I think that it is important to approach it with younger kids. What is a tangible thing Jewish leaders can do to make their communities more inclusive for Jews of color? One thing I'm going to say that you can do is try to stop making Ashkenazi Judaism the standard go-to for your Jewish culture, So that means switching up the food that you serve at synagogue. So that means changing the food that you serve at synagogue so that it represents a more wide span of cultures. Changing the jokes you make so that they can be more inclusive of other Jewish backgrounds. Changing the songs that you sing with children. I think that getting beyond the Ashkenazi-centric lens and trying to take bits of other cultures and other Jewish-specific cultures and bringing them in is a really great way to start to normalize that we represent a lot of different cultures within the Jewish umbrella, if that makes sense. Okay guys, it's a little bit later. Life happened, but let's continue. How can I support Black lives locally? So the first thing that you can do is obviously donate to Black Lives Matter. So you can donate to that organization. You can donate to local organizations that are supporting Black people in your community. You can protest is another thing that you can do. There are protests happening in cities all across the United States. Every one of the 50 states has had a protest, so it shouldn't be too hard to find a protest near you. Another thing you can do is support Black businesses. So supporting Black businesses directly affects the Black community in your area, so that's another thing that you can do. How do you feel about white people reaching out to their Black friends to check in? I have mixed to negative feelings about this. Ideally, you and your friends are already in communication about each other's lives, and the checking in should happen naturally because of that, like, general consistent communication, I think. If you're checking in with a friend who you're close to but just don't communicate with that much, I think that's also totally great, especially if you have the kind of relationship where you talk about these issues. If you don't have a relationship where you talk about these issues, or you don't have much of a friendship, it's definitely, I think, a little bit weird to check in. Not bad, but just a little bit weird. And I think you need to be ready and open for any kind of response. If the person wants to engage with you, you really have to be ready to engage in a conversation with them. If the person is standoffish and doesn't want like any part of this weird sort of checking in thing, you need to back off and understand that it felt weird to them and kind of accept that too. How do you feel when people say, I didn't know this was happening? I feel so angry. I feel so livid because this has been going on for forever. For the entire history of our country, this has been going, like, police brutality has been going on. But specifically, the organization Black Lives Matter has been an organization since 2013. So almost 10 years now, like 7 years. And so for people to say, oh, I had no idea this was happening, it just feels like, what rock were you voluntarily hiding under while people of color were dealing with this? And it makes me really upset, but on the flip side, I'm glad they're out of their rock now. Next one. Don't all lives matter? This person was asking it sarcastically, but I think that's an important question. Don't all lives matter? I mean, yeah, duh. Everyone should matter. All lives should matter. But the problem is Black people are getting killed at an extraordinarily high rate in comparison to other racial groups by police officers. And it's giving the impression that Black lives don't matter because people are not up in arms, or people have not been historically up in arms the way they should be when Black people are treated so horribly by society. Like, it's just when we all of a sudden we're talking about Black people, people get upset at the idea that they should be equal. In short, all lives should matter, and we are trying to fight for Black lives to matter the same as everyone else's. And for the value of Black life to be held to the same value as white life. So that's the goal. Getting everyone's lives to matter equally. Second to last question. How do I donate to organizations and find out whether or not they are scams? I am definitely not an expert on any of these things, but on figuring out which organizations are scams and not scams. So my suggestion is to stick to the big national organizations like the NAACP. Even Black Lives Matter, if you donate through their specific website, I think could be a really safe donation. Use those big national groups as resources to find smaller organizations to donate to. So follow them on social media, follow prominent leaders in those organizations and prominent leaders in your community, and they'll be able to give you legitimate resources that they themselves are donating to, that you can also then donate to. Okay, and then the last question. What do you think we can do on a daily basis to make the world a better and more inclusive place for the future? And I'm really hopeful that this person asked this question. It makes me feel like we are going to get somewhere good eventually as a society. I think the first thing is people need to use their privilege, their white privilege, to help people of color. That looks like pointing out to a store clerk that they're not treating customers equally if you see that happen. Pointing out to family members that their jokes or their comments are not acceptable. It means talking to the police and talking to police officers about the way they're treating someone in the moment. It means getting really uncomfortable and, frankly, potentially in dangerous situations, that, people of color are put in just because of their skin color. As a general personal perspective, I think that if everyone lived with more compassion for one another, and understood that everyone is learning, everyone should be learning, everyone should be growing, everyone should be trying to make the world as welcoming and open as possible. And I think if everyone can come to each day saying, I'm going to try to make this world as welcoming and open as possible, and if that was our inner mantra, we could do so much good. Diversify your friend group, diversify the businesses where you shop, diversify who you follow on the internet. Just try to open your world to more and more voices that are not that don't reflect the exact same worldview or the exact same cultural view or the exact same religious views. Just open your world. And if we all try to open our worlds, we're bound to run into each other somewhere, right? All right, guys, it has been a long day for me, and this has actually been a very tiring video to try to film. I hope this is somewhat helpful to someone. Let me know if it was helpful or not, or interesting or not, in the comments down below. Make sure you like this video and you subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye. Mom life, having a baby who doesn't let you get things done, even when they're serious, but also fun.